Welcome to RAIN, the Real Estate Investor Growth Network with your hostess, Jen Josie. Join like-minded real estate investors and accelerate your business towards greatness. You will hear step-by-step strategies for success, interviews with real estate rock stars, and we will dig deep into past projects where we bear it all, including the good, the bad, and some just plain ugly. So get excited. Here's the bestower of badassery herself, the real Jen Josie. Listener discretion is advised.
Hi, and welcome back. I'm Jen Josie, creator of RAIN, the Real Estate Investor Growth Network. Whoop, whoop. On today's episode, we have a guest that will be sharing their badassery. But before we begin, here's today's badassery bestowment, my little badass gift to you. Today's topic is the importance of a reliable cleaning team. Starting as a short-term rental host can be exciting, but one of the most critical factors to your success is the quality of your cleaning team. A clean space doesn't just make a great first impression, it can lead to glowing reviews, repeat guests, and less stress. Here are 5 reasons why finding a great cleaning team for your short-term rental is essential and how to ensure you're working with the right people. Number 1. First impressions count. Your cleaning team is the key to making your property shine for every guest. First impressions are everything in hospitality, and guests notice small details. A good cleaning team ensures that every surface is spotless, the linens are fresh, and everything looks perfect upon arrival. If your team misses the mark, it can lead to negative reviews that can be hard to bounce back from. Number 2, consistency builds your reputation. Short-term rental guests expect a consistent experience no matter where they stay. By partnering with a dependable cleaning team, you're ensuring a high standard of cleanliness each time. Guests who know they can trust your property for cleanliness will be more likely to return or recommend it to others. Number 3, turnover efficiency boosts your revenue. A skilled cleaning team works efficiently, allowing you to turn over the property faster. This is especially important if you have back-to-back bookings, as it allows you to maximize your occupancy rate. An experienced team will work quickly without sacrificing quality, ensuring that your next guest can check in on time. Number 4, minimizing your stress. A reliable cleaning team lets you focus on other aspects of managing your short-term rental. They should be proactive in spotting any maintenance issues, restocking essentials, and keeping you informed. With the right team, you won't have to worry about scrambling to replace supplies or address last-minute cleaning concerns. Number 5, handling emergencies smoothly. Emergencies happen, like last-minute bookings or a guest staying longer than expected. A top-notch cleaning team can adapt to unexpected situations and maintain the same high-quality standards under pressure. When your team is dependable in all situations, it protects your business from disruptions and ensures happy guests. So, a strong cleaning team is more than just a convenience. It's a cornerstone of a successful short-term rental business. They set the stage for positive guest experiences, consistency, and peace of mind. Invest in finding the right badass team, and it will pay off in positive reviews, repeat bookings, and a reputation that attracts guests to your property. Now, on to today's episode of the Real Estate Investor Growth Network podcast. We have with us Michael Kramer. Michael is a seasoned real estate investor with over 20 years of experience. In 2016, a significant turning point occurred when Michael was involved in an accident that resulted in the loss of vision in one eye. This life-changing event prompted a shift in strategy, leading him to focus on acquiring and holding long-term rentals, ultimately building a portfolio of over 400 residential rentals and 1,000 units and counting. This year, Michael was named a best-selling author for his co-authored book with renowned author and former FBI negotiator Chris Voss, titled Empathetic Leadership: How to Build Trust and Drive Results. Their collaboration showcases Michael's dedication to building meaningful relationships, which has been a driving force in his success. I am excited to meet this badass, so welcome to the show, Michael Kramer. How are you?
I'm good, Jen. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I'm so excited. I just loved Chris's book.
Never Split the Difference.
Never Split the Difference. Goodness gracious. I'm so excited.
Were you testing me? Like, does he really know Chris Voss? Yeah, no. Yes. It's
Never Split the Difference.
Yes.
And it's so important. It gives just such great ideas for, especially in the real estate business. So
it does.
When I saw you come through as a possible guest, I was like, oh my goodness, let's do it. So sorry, I'm going to start kind of on a down note here, but I, like you, lost my father in my early 20s. And I want to know how his passing really fueled your entrepreneurial journey. So I hate to start on a bummer here, but I do think it's important to kind of frame where this interview goes.
Well, I can appreciate so much that you can relate to that story. It's a hard time, no matter when your parents die. Obviously, we hope it's much later in life, but for us who had our fathers die when we were younger, it really has an impact, or it did on me. I don't want to speak for you.
Yes.
But Jen, I'll never forget the day that my mom came to me and told me that she didn't have $600 to pay the backhoe operator to dig his grave. The night before, he had died in our living room on a hospital bed after a 3-year battle with cancer. So we knew he was going to go. But when you finally see him take his last breath, which I did, I'm grateful I did, the grief sets in. Not that his suffering ended. And so on one hand, I was relieved for him, but I was terribly sad for me, right? Then the next day I see this, my mom comes to me and I see this look on her face. She's grieving and now she's scared. I don't know if you can imagine. She says, he's dead. I don't have the money to put him in the ground.
Wow.
And I remember thinking this sort of loss on one hand and this anger on the other. Like, how does this happen? He owned a business for 40 years. I was going to say,
he was a successful business owner.
Oh, right.
Successful business. Air quotes, successful.
Right. Yes. And by all accounts, he he had a business for 40 years in town and owned a collision repair shop. And his reputation is amazing. I can go back home today and they still call him a 50-year-old man. They still call me size boy. It's crazy because when you move away from your hometown and you come back, they're trying to figure out who are you, and you tell them who you are and they say, oh, you're size boy. Yeah. So, but back to that moment where I'm feeling this and I'm angry at my father. And I promised myself, Jen, that I would never let someone in my family feel the pain that my mom felt that day, the fear and the uncertainty that she was left with. I didn't know how I was going to fix it, but I became obsessed with this idea, like I'm going to make money and I'm going to solve this problem for my family. And so I set out on a journey and a few short years later, ended up buying my first business. It was a franchise business and it was very successful. I ended up owning 5 locations. The first year I was in business, I was the fastest growing franchise. The second and third year, I was the top in sales in the system of 150 locations. And I remember they asked me to speak at the national convention in Puerto Vallarta. I'm standing in the room. There's 300 people in the room. I'm sharing my story and reflecting in that moment. I kind of had this aha. I'm looking out and I see people in the audience that had been in business longer than I had been on the planet.
Wow.
And yet here I am, the guy in the front of the room saying, here's how here's how to be successful in the system. And so it was a very surreal experience, one that I'll never forget because I felt like I made it. And for the rest of that convention, I had a group of people following me around, asking me, what I did. I felt like a celebrity. But the tragedy in all of that is pursuing that success ended up costing me my marriage.
Oh,
yeah. We had 4 kids together.
wow.
And so the family's torn apart. I was financially successful, but I had this broken family. And I remember thinking, wow, not parody. What's the word I'm looking
Paradigm.
for? Gosh, I cannot think of the word. How different it was that my father's success as a family man, but financially as a failure. And here I am successful as a businessman, but a failure as a family man. And that's when I said, I have to figure out a way to fix this. And so we started Freed by Real Estate, which is our business today, to do both, create wealth, but also to maintain family harmony. And so we're obsessed with investing in great deals, but doing it as families so that throughout the life cycle of that ownership, the family's together. And even more importantly, when I pass on, there's not this distress that they feel and not knowing what to do with the assets. And a lot of times at the time of a death and there's assets involved, it can create even more disharmony as a family, people fighting over these things. And so we're very intentional about that. And we're actually planning for 100 years. That's sort of our mindset. We're thinking 100 years from now to say, how do we keep this going for generations, both financially, but family harmony wise?
And both those major events in your life, losing your dad and then going through a divorce, and I'm sure that is what has contributed to this book that you co-wrote with Chris Voss, which is called Empathetic Leadership. So before we get into that, though, I'm dying to ask this question. So you talk about running a family business. So who are the players in this family business and how do you make it work? Because a lot of times they're not successful. I work with my husband. We balance each other very well. I'm clearly the looks and the mouth of the business. And thank you for
obviously.
And he's the brains behind the curtain. He has the accounting degree. I'm like, what does mortgage, huh? How do you figure percentage?
Right.
What?
Right.
So he does all of that, but I get us the deals. I am the mouth,
It's
like
just
I said.
Debits and credits and who cares, journal entries, who cares about all that stuff?
I just fell asleep. I'm sorry, what were we talking? I'm just kidding. So yes, we balance each other very well, but you, I'm sure, have some more players on your family team here. So having gone through the divorce with your first, I'm assuming, are you remarried?
I am remarried.
Okay.
Yes.
And so now you have different eyes on this situation. So how do you run a successful family business?
Yeah, this is such a great question because it's a dynamic that if it's not managed well can just really go terribly wrong and cause a lot of family hurt and pain, probably even more so than the divorce because there's so many emotions and differing opinions. And to answer your question, there's 12 of us that work in the business full time, right? And it's a combination of
Are you in
my
Utah?
I've got 4 kids.
Okay.
And 3 of the 4 work full time in the business. And my wife, a couple of her siblings.
Okay.
Her dad. We have a couple of cousins. So blood, 12 family members. And then obviously the rest of them we consider to be family of affinity because everybody's treated like family when you work with a family. So the way that really comes across and how we manage that is we think of this a little bit differently and I think we're required to because it's family, where many times in a business, you're thinking more transactionally, like who has a skill set? What can they bring to the business? What are the needs of the business? How much are we going to pay? We're going to trade our dollars for their experience and expertise. And we say, yes, that's important. But instead of treating these as transactional relationships, we have to think of these as permanent relationships.
Oof.
Like regardless of what happens, regardless of how good my wife is, she's our CFO. So my wife and your husband would probably get along great. As good or as bad as she is at that, she's never going to stop being my wife. She's never going to stop being the sister She's never going to stop being the daughter of the folks that she's involved with. And so how does that matter? Well, when you think about these crucial conversations, which if you've heard the term crucial conversation, it comes from a book called Crucial Conversations. And there's actually 3 elements involved. One is strong emotions, opinions vary, and there's a lot at stake. So stakes are high, opinions vary, strong emotions, which in a family business is almost every conversation. So how do you navigate those conversations? Well, it starts with the person first and the results second. So we're always looking at how are you? Are we okay? And if we are, then we can start making business decisions. And what that allows us to do is to go a little bit slower, to be a little more intentional, and to always make sure we're honoring the other person. In a transactional relationship, it can be much easier to say, you're not getting your job done, you're fired.
Right.
We can't fire our family, and we won't. So it ends up being a little more complex, but if we are intentional about it and we honor the other person first, it ends up being a really beautiful thing.
And how do you handle disagreements? Dun, dun, dun.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. So it goes back to the book that I read from Chris Voss, Never Split the Difference. And I would give Crucial Conversations some of the same credit, but it's about getting to a point of collaboration. Disagreements are common. Opinions vary, right? There's a lot at stake and emotions are strong. So how do you handle a disagreement? Well, a lot of times a disagreement involves me and them facing each other. And there's usually something in between us. I'm going to use my glasses as an example. We allow this, whatever is the issue, to get in between us, right?
Okay.
And so what we do is we say, let's take this and let's move it to the side. And let's both get on the same side of this issue through the tools that Chris Voss teaches in his book, which are labels, mirrors, summaries, going for no. All of those tools, which seem to be very tactical, are actually the most deferential way to have a conversation. And if you're not wed to your outcome, meaning I want this and you want this, and you're willing to say, let's get on the same side of the issue, now you can start working on it together in what we call collaborating. And what's beautiful about that is when you're in a collaborative moment, there's this third mind that appears, where, and one of my favorite sayings is, don't be so sure of what you want that you wouldn't accept something better.
Ooh.
Yeah. So when you get into a collaborative situation and you have this third mind that exists, it allows us to oftentimes walk out of a meeting where there's been this, I want this and I want this, with a solution that's better than either of us expected. And even more importantly, Jen, is the ability to follow through on it. And the likeliness of executing on it goes way up because we've worked together on solving this problem. Is it easy? Is it beautiful every time? No. We make a lot of mistakes, but we always come back to those principles to guide us. And when we honor those principles, they end up serving us very well. And we end up not only having a better solution, but it's executed on at a level because both parties have, I'm going to say, skin in the game, where they've thought of it together and they have ownership in it.
I love it. And in my situation with my husband, I'm always correct. So he has just grown to accept that. We don't ever have that issue. Right. No, man, when it comes to marriage, there's maybe even a little bit more give than take. Yes, that
to
is
make
true.
that work, but it can certainly work.
I think about my friend Cheryl O'Hearn, who is a dear friend of mine who runs a business with her husband and 2 sons. And one time she said, because, they took their time, but they're very loud family. And so, but they would still work through things, but they discovered that moving their group meetings out of the house over to Starbucks actually helped that because they couldn't yell at each other as much in public. Yeah. So I just always thought that was a great reference there. So let's dive into your book, and it's called Empathetic Leadership. And you say tactical empathy is a superpower. So what makes you say that?
Yeah, so I sort of alluded to it a little bit earlier in that example of getting on the same side of the issue. But tactical empathy, it sounds, when you say that, it sounds like it's utilitarian.
Yes.
It doesn't sound like it should go with
militaristic. Yeah.
It doesn't sound like those two words should go together,
Right.
right? You're either empathetic or you're tactical, right? I either am going to get what I want, or I'm going to have empathy and show that I can understand the other person. Well, what tactical empathy does is, I'm going to use a word picture. So if you, and I'm not a musician, so forgive me if this offends any of the musicians that are listening, but I understand if you're learning to play the piano, oftentimes you're starting with learning some chords. And the chords are a combination of notes. I understand that when you play them together, they sound good. And so if you can string a couple of chords together, you end up creating maybe some music. Well, if I'm learning to play the piano and I hit the wrong chord, it doesn't sound good at all. And an example of that in the tactical empathy world would be if I say you need to, or you should, or why aren't you? That's hitting the wrong chords. It sounds like that, right? Whatever it is. Again, I'm not a musician, so forgive me for the terrible musical skills. But if you use these tools correctly, if you mirror, and a mirror is repeating back 1 to 3 words that you are trying to draw out more information on, or you use a label. A label is, it sounds like this, or it seems like that, or it looks like, or it feels like. Those are all intended to draw the other person out to truly understand what it is that they're saying. After you've done this, played a few of these chords, you can then try to string it together with a summary. And if you summarize it well, it doesn't mean you're agreeing with them. And I think that's a key thing. A lot of people are afraid to summarize something that they disagree with, because it feels like when you're saying it that you're agreeing with them, even if you vehemently disagree. But if you can do that well, what happens, Jen, is the other person looks at you and says, that's right. Not you're right, because oftentimes you're right means shut up, I want to talk. But if you get a that's right, there's this moment in this relationship or in this conversation where, as Chris would describe it, a micro epiphany occurs. Something in our brain actually fires and says, Jen gets me. Jen understands me, right? And we just finished a whole presidential election and all of and I'm not going to get into any of that. But if you listen to the candidates, you never have a dialogue. But when they say something on the stage that resonates with you, oftentimes you'll say, that's right.
Yep. And
that's what endears that candidate to you, regardless of your view. If they say something, this person gets me, now all of a sudden there's an endearment to that person or a loyalty to that person. And so if you can do that in a conversation where you say mirrors, labels, and summary and get to a that's right, now you've put yourselves shoulder to shoulder instead of face to face. And it's in that moment where collaboration starts. It's in that moment where you start working on the problem together and solving the problem. That's why it's a superpower.
And I just feel like this concept is missed by so many and could be incorporated in everything. And the title of the book is Empathetic Leadership. And immediately your mind goes to leadership of your company. And so we are small business owners. It's just my husband and I. And what I'm hearing from you is empathetic leadership can also trickle down to negotiate or working with clients, working with sellers as far as real estate, and working with even contractors, or as in my badassery bestowment, cleaning teams, for example.
Yes.
So how does this apply to the rest of the real estate investment world?
What's interesting, Jen, is that these tools are transcendent. Let me give you a quick example. My son, who's now 23, is the head of our acquisition team. At 19, he came to me and said he wanted to drop out of college and join the family business. I immediately had strong opinions about that. I immediately had emotions, and I thought very differently. The stakes are high here because I put money away for him to go to school. And he obviously had a whole set of other emotions and opinions. Using these tools, we were able to have a conversation where, although I didn't agree with him, he was able to say, and he actually did say during this conversation, he said, Dad, that's right. And it was in that moment where we could start to then work on it together. And what I realized, Jen, is that it wasn't about getting out of school it wasn't about dropping out of school or finishing school. It was about quitting on himself. It wasn't about, I want to make sure you have a piece of paper so that I can be proud of you. It was, I want you to do something difficult, make a promise to do something and actually complete it so you can have your self-confidence. It wasn't about that I had to have him with a degree, because oftentimes the degrees aren't applied to what we do. It was about having the ability to say, I'm capable and I'm going to do this. So it was a different set of things. But when we came to that aha moment where he says, that's right, now we could start working on it together. And we agreed to have him come to work in the business. But it was understanding that he was going to have to do hard things, that nothing was going to be handed to him, that he'd have to start at the bottom. He did. He started to clean out. We call them trash outs. He was doing trash outs on properties. And it wasn't to make him suffer. But it was to say to him, you're still going to have to learn the lessons that I wanted you to learn in college. And as long as you're okay with that, we can work together. Bringing it full circle, Luke, who's 23, has 6 figures of annual passive income. Wow. He owns over $3 million in his own real estate. He wouldn't have to work another day in his life, and he has no college debt, right?
Yep.
So imagine all the things that he's learned about who he is, what he's made of, what he's capable of, how important it is to work with others that he didn't learn in school, but still learned here. And I was able to get over my own aversion or resistance to him quitting, because I saw him start and do something hard here and finish it here. I couldn't be more proud of him. So it's not just about business. It literally applies to every relationship you have.
Whether that's your cleaning team, your contractors work, I see how this will work throughout all aspects of real estate. So thank you for sharing that story. And I can remember clean outs, and that was one of the first people I hired out. I'm like, clean, and then the cleaning team, like get rid of all the dust and everything, that clean the windows anyway. So I used to do that. Right. My nails did not look this good back then. So I want to kind of ask a loaded question here. What was it like working with Chris Voss? I'm a super fan, even though as soon as I started this podcast, the book title totally escaped my brain, but it was huge in how we work with sellers and other people as well. But I'm just curious, what's he like? Like, tell us about Chris Voss and how he's influenced you.
Well, what's interesting is Chris Voss is a Midwest guy. So I'm in Omaha, Nebraska. He was raised in Iowa, Mount Pleasant, Iowa. He was a cop in Kansas City. And then when he joined the FBI, obviously he moved on, but his roots were here. So there's a lot of similarities between us in terms of our upbringing. And the downside is he's a Hawkeye fan, which I can't tolerate as a friend, but I gave him a pass. No, he's actually... He would sit here and have the same conversation that we're having now. He actually applies the tools that he teaches, because it is the most respectful way to communicate with people. He's very present. He's very open. He asks a lot of great questions. A quick story. We were invited to Las Vegas to celebrate our best-selling status on Amazon. And we had dinner, and there was a room. I'm a contributing author in our book. There's several other authors. So there were about 12 of us in the room with Chris. And he was there early. He met and spent time with each of us. And he stayed. He was the last one to leave. My wife and I and Chris and his girlfriend were the last ones to leave. And he was so gracious and so kind and so present. I was just like, these sets of tools and these things are not only impacting me, but I see how he lives it out. And it's a wonderful thing to see, because he's drawn so many great people to him. Not to say that I'm a great person, but he's surrounded with great people, and he's just a great human being. So it's been an honor to work with him.
And how did you get to work with him?
Well, I'm like you, I'm sort of a super fan. And I think it was sort of serendipitous, maybe a divine appointment. I'm a big consumer, so I've watched everything that he's got on YouTube. I've read his book, obviously, many times. It's an annual read for me, because these skills, like playing the piano, are perishable.
Yep.
And so I'm constantly practicing. And I had subscribed to the newsletter. I'm reaching out to the company, And I had helped them, I helped a friend of mine hire Chris Voss and his company to come in and do sales training for him. And they had a team of about 50 people. And one day I get an email from his agent or somebody that represents him. I don't know if it's the only agent or somebody, one of his agents, and said, "Hey, Chris is writing a book and we'd be interested in hearing a story from you. And if we like the story, then we'll consider you for the book." And so immediately I submitted a story, which they got back to me. I don't know, this has been a couple of years ago, this all started, but they got back to me and said, "Hey, we kind of like what you're writing. Would you be against us providing a ghostwriter because you're not a writer and an editor because your grammar sucks?" And I said, "Yeah, let's do it." So they got me a ghostwriter and an editor to polish my stories. And they said it ended up making the cut and I ended up in the book. So
that is
it was
so cool. That is so cool. So I kind of want to change the direction of this interview and get into real estate specifically. And one of these pre-suggested interview questions you have here is, everyone seems to be interested in real estate investing. And this just recently happened to me. I just recently lost my mother and I have an inheritance coming in. But what is one piece of advice you would give to someone, me, that has money to invest but doesn't know where to start? I actually know where I'm going, but I thought this was such a great question and it's fitting for me as well. So what advice for someone that has money to invest but doesn't know where to start?
Yeah, this is such a great question. First of all, real estate is the greatest wealth building tool known to man.
Who's the guy in Omaha near you?
I want to say it's Buffett. Is it Warren? Warren Buffett.
And he still goes to McDonald's for breakfast. I love that man.
Yeah.
So yes, anyone who is making money out there has done it through real estate. I agree 1,000%. So keep going.
Yeah. So the real estate game is one that is tried and true and proven. I think the myth about real estate is that oftentimes people think they buy something and it will just kind of make itself money.
Yeah. The myth is it's easy.
It's easy and it's passive, right? You don't have to do anything. The truth is that if you're going to buy real estate by yourself, then you need to understand you're really buying a business. Whether you have one asset or you have 10 or you have 500, it doesn't matter. It has to be run like a business. So there's marketing, there's sales, there's accounting, there's the delivery of the service, signing leases, there's maintenance and repairs. Then you have obviously the innovation. What are you going to do to improve, whether it's your portfolio? How are you going to take care of your customers? All of these elements are requirements in every business, whether it's, a cleaning company or it's Warren Buffett's company. They all have these needs that are the same for every business, meaning those critical functions. So if you think about, I'm going to start another business and you're comfortable with that, then I highly recommend doing it on your own because you get all of the benefit.
Yep.
You have to do all the work, but you get all of the benefit. If you're not there and you say, I have a great W-2 or I have this inheritance and I love what I'm doing and I don't want the distraction of starting another business, a better option for those folks would be to invest in somebody else like us, a Freed by Real Estate, that is already in the business. So we have the acquisitions team, we have the construction company, we have the property management team, and you basically ride the coattails of somebody like me investing your capital alongside us and get all the same benefits of ownership, but you don't have to do any of the work. So those are kind of the two ends of the spectrum.
Very well said. And I want to get into that. You have over 20 years of experience. So before your accident in 2016, what was your focus in real estate back then?
So yeah, I'm a licensed general contractor. And so the reason we even got into real estate at all was sort of as an ancillary thing to our business. In the Midwest, we have the cyclical nature of the business due to weather primarily, but also during the holidays. In Nebraska, people don't want their houses torn apart during Thanksgiving and Christmas. And so when you build a big construction company and you're going like crazy from March until October, and you have this big team, what do you do from November to, February? Well, if you don't put them to work, they're going to go find something else to do. And then come next spring, how do you get them back? So we were buying houses as projects to send our crews to keep them busy over the winter. so that in the spring, when customers were going to come back and need retail work done, we had the crews ready to go and we didn't lose all of our good help. So it was sort of a necessity. I called it greasing the skids, which is sort of a cruise way of saying, I just want my guys to stay busy.
Yes.
But it ended up being, we'd fix something and sell it. And honestly, we didn't care if we even made money on it. We just wanted to make sure the crews were available because the majority of our money came from the retail business. Well, once I had the accident and I couldn't, I still have the hand skills, but when you lose your vision in one eye, if you walk around for a day closing one eye, you'll recognize that you have no depth perception. And so there's safety concerns when you're dealing with, saws or climbing a ladder or whatever. If you want to keep your limbs in your life, it's probably best that you have both eyes to do it, to protect yourself.
Absolutely.
And so that's when we said, we're going to start holding assets and create more passive income. Because if I was going to be relying upon my hand skills and ability to continue to grow the construction company, we were going to be in trouble. So it was at that point we started to buy and hold. So that's how we got started.
That's great. And I want to share, I think the GC position when you are flipping houses, when you're in real estate investing, is such an important asset of your business. And I actually told my husband one time that I really wanted to sleep with a GC, thinking he would say, which one? But instead, he got his GC license himself. So
I love that. I love that.
And then one of my coaches actually told me, because we have a construction business now, for me to own 51% of it, because a woman-owned business or a minority-owned business, well, if there's ever like government, bids out there, or whatever, we will be bumped to the top of the list. So there's a little nugget to the listeners out there. But yes, GCs are key to being in this business. So
it is.
You focus now on rentals, and you have over 400 residential rentals and 1,000 units. And the name of your company, Freed by Real Estate, is that what it's called?
Correct.
I did not have that in your intro. Sorry for that. But
no worries.
People can. You said this when I was asking about someone who comes into some chunk of money. Investing is a great way to do it. How would people invest with Freed by Real Estate?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So basically, we're already buying assets. We're already, like I mentioned, we already have the construction company. And because we own the assets and we own the construction company, we're passing on all of that work at our cost. So we're not charging retail prices. For example, a kitchen remodel at a retail environment might be $20,000 on the low end, and we can do it, let's say, for $10,000 because our labor is at cost and our materials are at cost. And then we have our own property management company. So when you're dealing with a larger asset, like apartments, which is what we focus on today, a lot of times the tenant care is really critical in that process because the tenants don't tolerate extra noise or, a dumpster in the parking lot or, guys working on the property during certain hours. And so to own the property management company is really key to be able to take care of those tenants that are choosing to stay through the process. And so investing with us means you put your capital in a deal that we're already doing. And you just go along for the ride with us. It's typically, we only buy value add stuff. So the stuff that needs work, construction wise, needs help with the tenant base. We level the asset up, we level up the tenant base, and we increase the NOI or net operating income, which on these larger assets, they're not valued like a single family home where they're comparing one home to the next. And they're saying, well, if this house with this same configuration or square footage sold for 200, then reasonably this one could bring 200. In the apartment space, it's all based, it's actually a valuation of the business.
Right.
And how much net operating income are we driving? Well, if I force the appreciation of the property through new kitchens and baths and making it nicer and allowing us to get a better tenant who's willing to pay a little bit more for the nicer property and to sign a long-term lease, now we have an increased NOI. And once that NOI goes up, we go back and either sell it to somebody else who's looking for a stabilized asset that doesn't want to do, all the repairs and manage all the construction and manage the tenants in the process, or we refinance it. And in either scenario, the investor who's gone along for the ride is cashed out. And our base case, like our buy box, if you would, says that we have to double our investors' money. So once we can double their money is when we will exit, either through a refi or a sale. They cash out. If they put in 100,000, now they have 200. They can choose to reinvest, or they can go do something else with it.
And is there a website for them to go to?
The best way to find us is freedbyrealestate.com.
Wonderful. And I love that you are like kind of a jack of all trades, because I too, like, we call it the BRRRR strategy for these single family homes, small rehabs. And you're buying undervalued property, putting in the work, because it costs you, like you said, that kitchen is only going to be $10,000, where retail it would be 20. By the way, those are some really low numbers for redoing a kitchen.
It is, yeah.
But the round number, we're going to say it here, yes.
I'm watching too much HGTV, and we do it in 30 minutes, by the way, just like they do on TV.
Exactly. Snap a finger and it's done. And your survey came in on time, and your painters were never sick. Yes, I get it. So, yeah. But I really like that about your company, because if listeners, if you're out there, there are several opportunities where you can park your money somewhere. But for you, having had the general contractor experience and have those connections and speak GC language, which is very different from, say, investor money side, general partners and all that. So I think that just builds for such a successful platform for people to invest their money. Do you have requirements? I'm assuming they have to be what is the word? I just escaped my brain.
Accredited.
Accredited. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay. So accredited.
Yeah, so we have both. We actually have two separate funds. One fund is for accredited investors only, and one is for non-accredited. The difference is very simply that we can only advertise publicly accredited to an accredited investor. So if we have a deal that nobody ever sees, we can't publicly, we don't ever advertise. We can't bring people in that are not accredited if we aren't advertising it. So that's more of a friends and family, folks that we know who are previous investors that have dealt with us and said, hey, we're going to put money into this non-accredited deal. But if we're going to go out and raise money with new investors and we advertise it, then we can only accept accredited investors. What that means is the SEC regulates, the Securities and Exchange Commission regulates, and it's really trying to protect the consumer, right? So they're saying you have to make a minimum amount of money. If you're married, it's like $300,000 a year as a couple, and or you have $1 million in net worth, excluding your primary residence. So if you have other investments, or if you make a decent amount of money, they're saying you're savvy enough that you can invest with somebody that you just met. Whereas the non-accredited, you have to have a strong connection with them and a history of a relationship, because they don't have that financial footing. They don't have the net worth or the income, but they know you and they trust you, and those folks can invest. So that's kind of the two buckets that the investors come in under.
Michael, you explained that so well. I appreciate you doing that. So I have really enjoyed this first part of the podcast here, but we are going to dig a little deeper and go to the second part of the podcast, which is what makes Michael Kramer a badass. And I use the acronym BADASS, and the first letter is B for book. What's a book besides Split the Difference that has made
you can't do that to me.
Right on the spot. No, you can use that one. What's a book that's made a huge difference in your life?
No, I am going to honor your request and not use Never Split the Difference, although asterisk Never Split the Difference would be my first choice.
I got to tell you, Michael, that book is mentioned all the time on this podcast. I have done over 250 episodes, and that one comes up quite a bit. So go ahead.
Yeah. So the other one is high on my list is called The Blue Ocean Strategy.
Ooh.
And this is a book that it's really, really, really good, because so many times we as business owners are thinking about how do we compare to our competitors. And oftentimes we're trying to, one up our competitors, right? And what the Blue Ocean Strategy does is it flips that paradigm from saying, don't worry about your competitors, think about it from your customer's perspective. And one of my favorite sayings is, if you want to know why John Smith buys, what John Smith buys, you need to see the world through John Smith's eyes. And so putting yourself in the seat of the customer and saying, What are their pain points? What do they want to eliminate altogether? What do they want to reduce? That's a headache. What can you do more of to make it more interesting to them? Or what can you create from scratch that nobody's ever done before? And if you can come up with those answers to those four things by asking your customers, by sitting down and talking to them. One of my favorite questions is, if you had a magic wand, what would you do differently? Or how would this experience look? And you get all kinds of great feedback. If you can take that feedback and apply it in your business, it takes normally what most people would call a unique selling proposition and turns it into an unfair advantage. Because now you're saying, I'm looking at this through the lens of our customer, and it makes them feel foolish, your customers. It makes them feel foolish for considering going anywhere else, regardless of price.
It is that empathetic leadership that you are doing with Mr. John Smith there. And I know a John Smith, he's lovely. So thanks for talking about him today. All right.
He's a great guy.
He is fabulous. All right. The first A in badass is for advice. You've given us excellent advice today, but what is the best piece of advice you've ever received?
So this came from, I'm a Husker fan. I'm a Nebraska Cornhusker fan. And our coach, I'm a student of leadership too. So I listened to all the coaches after the press conference after the game. And Coach Rule said, never take advice from someone that you wouldn't trade places with, and never accept criticism from somebody that you're not taking advice from. That's the advice I would give. So
good. And side note here, didn't Frost coach there?
He did.
Okay.
He did.
Because my alma mater is the University of Central Florida, and he kicked ass as a coach.
Yes, he did.
And plus, he's like really tough to look at. Oh my gosh, he's so dreamy. Whew, what's his first name? I just remember Scott Frost. I should be like Frosty.
Before we go on, I want to give you one other little bit on this, the advice, because I think what so many people listening struggle with is trying to please somebody that they don't want to become. And I think if they can get out of their own way and say, I don't want to be like my mother. Love you, Mom, but I'm not going to take your advice because I don't want to turn out like you. It's not a bad thing to do, or please a boss, or whatever it might be, the neighbors. Only take advice from people that you trade places with, because that's an aspirational bit of advice. The advice from the people that are trying to hold you back, or you feel like you're trying to please, are not going to help you reach your goal. So that's why I suggest that advice.
Very well said. And thanks for stopping me from my frosty thoughts there and adding that. That was fantastic.
Yeah.
All right. The D in badass is for drive. What drives you to be successful?
Well, it goes back to what we said at the beginning of the podcast, which is the creating that generational wealth because of the pain I saw in my mother's face, and honoring the families, my family and the other families that join us along the way, to make sure there's harmony, because I don't want families to fall apart either on the way or after they've accumulated these assets. So that's really what drives me, is creating wealth with families that want to stick together for the long term.
And you said 100 years. What's your approach to that? What do you mean by 100 years?
Yeah, so there's you're asking a lot of great questions, by the way. You're digging into the why behind it. There's an adage that says shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations. Have you heard this?
No.
So it's true in every culture. For example, in Asia, they'll say rice paddy to rice paddy in 3 generations, or potato farm to potato farm, or potato farmer to potato farmer in 3 generations. So basically what it means is the first generation buys something of value, the second generation builds it, and the third generation sells it. So in 3 generations, it's gone. Now the 4th generation has to start over.
Oh.
And so if you plan for 100 years, if each generation is 20 years, I'm planning for the 4th generation to make sure that they're not at a shirt sleeves phase again. So how do we plan so that what we build doesn't get sold and is enduring? And if we can continue to teach the next generation to do the same, it could endure truly as a dynasty, more like the Rockefellers, which I realize is a very aspirational approach, but it's one that I buy into.
I love it. Great explanation. All right. The second A in badass is for aspiration, and I'm a big goal setter. So what is a goal you are currently working on?
Yeah. There's several goals I'm working on, but I'd say one that's very simple is we always start with the end in mind. And so what are we trying to build? And then we back into what does it take to build? So for us, we want to be a $10 billion family. And in order to get there, we want to buy 400 units per year for the next 25 years.
Whew. That is a goal. Very, very nice. All right. The first S in badass is for systems. I'm sure working with family members, you guys really got to put some systems in place. So what systems do you have in place to help you achieve success?
Yeah, this is another great question. There's dozens of systems that we use. For example, for the property management, having a software to manage all the tenant relationships, all the payments, called AppFolio.
Nice.
Great system. We have a hard money lending business. We use Baseline as a system to manage all the intake, all the applications, all the loan servicing, managing all the payments. There's systems all over the place. QuickBooks for accounting. We can't do what we do without systems in place. And so there's dozens of them that are required to run a business of our scale. But relying on a system, and by the way, you can start day one with a simple Excel spreadsheet and keep track of some things. If that's all you have, that's still a great start because to rely on your memory and to have anecdotal, training isn't going to allow you to do anything except stay stuck. So having those systems really helps liberate you to train, empower, and equip others so that you can continue to level yourself up.
Yeah, my husband loves an Excel spreadsheet. I always tell him he's a freak in the sheets.
I love that.
All right.
And you're sleeping with your contractor for crying out loud.
Exactly.
You got it. Yeah.
This has been such a great interview. We are going to wrap up this podcast here with the final S in badass, which is for success. What does success mean to Michael Kramer?
It's legacy.
Yes.
It's success is knowing that all of the pain and mistakes that I've made over these years have been used as learning opportunities to help set my family up in a way that my father didn't, and to help set my family's harmony up in a way that I didn't, to correct that. That to me is what matters most, is legacy.
Absolutely. And it has been so amazing having you on the show. Listeners, make sure you go and check out Empathetic Leadership that he co-authored with the super cool Chris Voss. And now I can put Michael Kramer in that super cool category as well. And if you just happen to stumble across a bucket of money, check out Freed by Real Estate. I love the concept that you have behind it, and being really involved in all aspects of the investment business. So it is freedbyrealestate.com. And where can they buy Empathetic Leadership?
It's on Amazon.
Amazon.
So, yep, check it out.
Perfect. Well, I appreciate you, Michael. This was such a great interview. You are so easy to talk to. Thank you for being here today.
Likewise, I've really enjoyed our conversation, Jen.
Absolutely. And that is all. Thank you for listening, and we'll catch you on the next episode. Now, go out there and share your badassery. And don't forget, make it a great day. Take care. Bye-bye. Whoop, whoop.
Thank you for listening to RAIN, the Real Estate Investor Growth Network. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform so you never miss an episode. If you need more badassery, you can follow Jen Josie by visiting therealjenjosie.com or become a member of RAIN by registering on rainmastermind.com.